Well, at the time of this recording, it is a very pleasant minus 30 something outside. So you'll forgive us if my next guest and I just sit in the comfort of our studios and have a chat over Zoom. We're going to be talking today about another kind of hunting, still involves deer, but this time of year, I guess a lot of folks, and maybe not even hunters, get out and enjoy something called shed hunting. And a real pleasure to welcome Geoff Dorward. Of course, Geoff was featured in a story that I did with he and his son back in the fall. And real pleasure to welcome him back, Geoff. Thanks for taking some time.
You betcha, Mike. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me on board today.
So let's jump into it. Shed hunting, what is it?
What is it? Well, basically, it's you're outside in February, March, April, and you're looking for antlers that the deer and moose have shed off their heads. So a lot of people will call it participation trophies, if you will. But for me, it's really an excuse to go out and explore the outdoors, get more familiar with the animals that are in the area that I'm hunting, and also look at some of the new trails where they're bedding, where they're feeding. Their patterns change from season to season. So I like being outdoors, and realistically, it's an excuse to get myself outdoors, some family, some friends. The dog runs around with me. She tries to find some. And it's just another excuse to be out there.
So this is sort of part of the natural progression, I guess, of the life of a male deer, moose, what have you, that they will drop their antlers at a certain time of the year, and then the process starts all over again, and they start to grow new ones.
Exactly. So you're anything with an antler, not obviously a horn, but deer, moose, elk will all shed their antlers. Normally, the first ones to go are moose in January. So I've seen some moose even drop in late December on my trail cams and whatnot. I have videos and pictures of moose walking around with one antler, where you can see the hole that's remaining in their head where the antler is shed off the pedicle. Deer, normally a little bit later, mid-February, late February, early March is when they all start going. But a lot of people will believe that it's weather dependent as well. So if it's an easier winter, the food source is a little bit more available, it's a little bit milder, they tend to hang on to them a little bit longer. And when the conditions aren't right for them and they're a little bit more stressed, they tend to shed off those antlers a little bit sooner. So I'm not exactly sure on the science behind it or why, but I try to get out there early February. There's some early droppers that have happened in and around Alberta around this time. They've been dropping for a couple of weeks already. The ones in the area that I'm scouting right now and the land that I bow hunt on, there's only been a couple of them, two really small deer. One's a spiker and one's a small 2x2 that I have on camera with only one antler there. The rest are still holding on strong, but hopefully within the next couple of weeks, they will start to drop and I'll be able to find some nice sheds.
Does the size of the antler that you find, does that give you an indication of the potential that deer may have in the coming season in terms of, if you find a fairly decent shed, does that mean that deer could produce even larger ones in the following season?
For sure. So as deer and moose grow, they see their maximum potential probably at around year 4, year 5, and then they start declining. You'll see the antler mass get a little bit thinner. Maybe the tines aren't so longer. They don't grow as big, as strong. So yeah, you can definitely tell a lot by the sheds themselves. Another thing that I like to do is with the amount of trail cams that I have around the hunting properties that I hunt on, you can recognize these deer. Year after year, they will grow the almost identical same antler. So if there's one that has a little fork on one side or a drop tine on another side, you see these deer year after year and you can recognize them immediately. A lot of my non-hunter friends will say, like, you can't recognize if that's the same deer. And I'm like, unfortunately, yeah, we can. So sometimes we even pick names to identify them out. Not everyone does, but I do. It's kind of fun to maintain a history with these animals that I'm in search of every fall, and just fun to see them grow, where you have maybe some of these animals you saw at 1 or 2 years old and now it's 6, 7 years later, and you can still identify those same deer.
So It was interesting. You have been posting, and I'll post your Instagram account so folks can follow you, Geoff. But you have been posting some interesting trail camera footage. Is that sort of one of your indicators that you'll use this late in the season to sort of give you an idea that, oh, okay, we're starting to see more deers, but without antlers?
For sure. So I do give my trail cams a little bit of a break once the end of November and the end of hunting season stops. But normally that week between Christmas and New Year's, I'm itching to get back outside. So I'll go and I'll put up a few more cameras around, and I'll put them on fields where there's a food source. I'll put them on main game trails, on intersections, again, just to maintain that history with deer. I'm passionate about the outdoors, as you know. So the more I can see what's happening out there when I'm not there, the better it is for me. Those cameras as well, I could go out there. I was out there yesterday. It was minus 33, but I just couldn't stay away. It was one of those weekends where I'm like, I need to be out here. I need to check the trail cams. I want to see if any of them are dropped yet. Most of the time when those drop, you'll find them sitting on top of the snow. But if we had a snowfall and it snows 6 inches, those antlers are going to be buried probably until mid-April, late April, May, when all the snow starts melting again. So I like to find them when they're fresh. I like to see them right when it happens. And definitely those trail cameras, they give me an early indication where I can see on a week-to-week basis how many of them have dropped, how many are starting to drop. Am I wasting my time walking around too early, looking for things that aren't even on the ground yet? So yeah, trail cameras tell me which day, what time, how the deer are acting, and what they're walking around with on their head.
I've got to imagine that this would be kind of a fun activity for even non-hunters to participate in, and maybe even some artists. We certainly see a lot of antlers being used for different art projects and furniture, that type of thing. So a great use for that resource.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone has lots of different uses for antlers that they find. I mean, myself, I have a couple of old bull moose antlers that are in the backyard. People will use them to decorate the inside of their house. The favorite thing that I use them for dog chews. You'll see for all the dog owners out there, they'll see that you go and you buy a little 6-inch piece of elk antler, and they'll charge you $30 for it. So it's natural. The dogs actually love them. They chew them. So many different uses for them. You can go online and you can see what people have created, how they've involved them with even if someone has a successful hunt, let's say, and they have those shed antlers from a deer that was the year before, you can see how that deer has grown, and you can even incorporate the shed antlers if you have it as a shoulder mount or a Euro mount. And it's nice to involve what you find with some of your other hunting projects. So definitely lots of uses for it.
In terms of locations, Geoff, are there specific features that you're looking for, like a field versus a forest versus the edge of a wooded area?
For sure. So this time of year, when the deer and moose shed their antlers, they're bedding and they're going to a field where they feed, or a food source. Doesn't necessarily have to be a field. So when I'm searching for that, I'm looking for those trails between their bedding areas and the fields. They'll feed in some of those fields all night, every night. So I'm looking at intersections. I'm looking at where they might jump over fences or fallen trees, enough where it's going to give them a little bit of a jerk and kind of help those antlers to fall off. Those are normally where I find them.
Obviously, this activity, Geoff, takes place outside of hunting season, but are there other rules or regulations that folks that do collect sheds need to be aware of?
For sure. So when you go outside and you find a shed antler, and you can always tell what a shed antler is because it's normally going to be a single antler. And at the base of that antler is going to be a rounded part. And you can tell that it's actually fallen off from the skull. But a lot of times you'll come across what we call deadheads, or an animal that hasn't survived the winter, or maybe has been attacked by a predator, coyotes, old age. If you find a deadhead where the skulls are still intact to that skull, or the antlers are still intact to that skull, you actually need to apply for found dead wildlife permit through Fish and Wildlife. Very easy process to do. You let them know where you found it, what you were doing. You pay a small fee for it. They give you a license/receipt that allows you to keep that dead head. And what they want to do is they want to make sure that animal wasn't poached earlier in the year. They might have leads on that skull or that type of animal that you found involving another poaching case or something. So they just want to make sure that everything is done legally and fairly. And I actually have a couple of those in my possession that I've had to apply for a found dead wildlife permit. Very easy to do and leaves you with a nice little treasure.
Well, here's hoping that the weather improves and allows all of you hardy souls an opportunity to get out there and hunt for these sheds. Geoff, thanks so much for your time and your insight on a kind of a fascinating sideline to the hunting world.
You betcha. Anytime, Mike.